The grid that we have now is just only incorporating one-way energy flows.
At one end you've got some generation, at the other end you've got a bunch of users, and the common phrase is from the generator to the toaster.
Well, the current grid was conceived with a very unsophisticated interaction with customers.
We have a series of generation sources, which are usually fossil fuel based and usually centralised in different parts around the country. We have a transmission network, and these are the large high voltage kind of transmission lines that we often see passing through paddocks. They're sort of the heart of the grid, and then from there we have these substations that step it down into the smaller and lower voltage that ultimately run in the cables and wires that we see around the street that deliver it to home.
Effectively what you have is a large power source, big power plant that generates power for lots and lots of homes. We take that energy, we push it down some wires that you see on the side of your street, and then you turn on your kettle or your sandwich maker, and the power that's generated miles and miles away from the big plant gets used by you at home in a one-way transaction.
That's the key of it really, generation, transmission, and then what we call distribution.
There's an economic aspect and a climate change aspect.
One of the challenges is climate change and also rising electricity prices, and also the need to have a resilient energy system.
We've got a situation where the costs are being driven by that peak demand. And we're not talking about a trivial amount. We're talking about $50 billion in Australia over the next 5 years. So that $50 billion has to be paid by customers, and it's why we're seeing such an increase in customer bills at the moment.
Every loss of electricity, every wastage, means that some of the generation which produced carbon emissions is being wasted.
I'm definitely concerned that we're moving into an area where we might be having an unsafe climate.
It's generally accepted that climate change is an important challenge for society, and the electricity system is one of the major contributors to that. If we don't start acting now, the projections are quite bleak.
Who knows what kind of effects that's going to have? They seem to be very scary.
The problem with the current grid is that it's not really designed for the things we want to do today.
It's actually not very resilient. It's often unreliable. It's very inflexible.
It was designed to transmit energy to particular places, and it doesn't have the flexibility to adapt and supply energy to new locations as needed.
We don't really know right now who is using power, when they're using it, how much they're using. So it's very difficult for the providers to manage through the change when they don't have knowledge.
The inflexibility of it, I suppose, in terms of, when we have outages or problems, we really don't know that there's a problem until someone actually calls.
Only about 30–40% of the heat energy is converted into electricity at a coal-fired power station.
Add to that the infrastructure is very old, 50, 70 years for some transformers.
I think the current electricity system is overburdened. It's having to deal with increasing demand and difficulty of maintaining present supply.
So you get this massive peak, which means that the electricity suppliers have to bring on all of the generators that they have in order to try and meet that peak.
And at the same time, we're trying to transform it into something new. We're trying to turn it into a green, smart grid. The current electricity system developed pretty much from the very first power stations that were built, and it was just an evolution where it just got bigger and bigger and more centralised from those early days.
It's a problem that basically has built up over time. It's technology that was built back in the 60s or earlier, and so forth, and that we've been incrementally updating and building, but we probably haven't been spending everything we need to on the grid.
I think you're at a point now where we've got a huge growth in telecommunications and electronic products that need charging that just wasn't foreseen 30 years ago.
As the population has changed, and our lifestyles have changed, and the technologies that we're using in our homes and the power consumption has changed, the grid hasn't come along on the ride.